Tarot history. Where does the tarot come from? What are the occult origins? Is it a picture book of initiation? What is this all about? Today we're going to delve into these topics here, and there's a lot of information out there for people that want to go deeper. Michael Dummett has written some really good books on tarot history, and then also Kaplan's Tarot Encyclopedia, or Encyclopedia of Tarot, kind of give another like historical slant on the tarot, and kind of you learn a little bit about these Italian 15th century Italian decks and the origins of tarot. So that's what we're going to go into today. This video is going to go along with my Patreon tarot course. So some of my videos are available for everyone, and some of my videos will be available only for Patreon subscribers. Patreon is like an OnlyFans for occultists. For $10 a month, you get some of my videos are visible for everyone, and some of my videos are only visible for Patreon subscribers, which is $10 a month. It's like buying me a cup of coffee once a month for all this content I put out. So, just non-stop, I'm putting out videos. We do readings together. We read various books. We read the 3 books of occult philosophy. We're working through this tarot course, and we're working through all this material together. And then, like I said, some of my videos will, Patreon is a way to monetize my content. So this video is a big thank you to all those people that support my Patreon. That $10 a month actually makes a big difference for me, so I really appreciate all of you on Patreon. So today we're talking a little bit about the history of tarot. And there's a lot of nonsense out there, a lot of nonsense, or rather a lot of unsubstantiated claims, things that we can't really prove. You could say all kinds of things, but can you prove it? The tarot, you often hear that it comes from an ancient Egyptian book of Thoth. And this idea actually goes back to the 18th century Court de Gebelin. Court de Gebelin, in his Le Monde Primitif in the 18th century, he came up with this idea that the tarot is based on an ancient Egyptian book of Thoth, an ancient book of Egyptian wisdom. Okay? And then you have Aliette, Jean-Baptiste Aliette, or Attella. Attella wrote books on divination, how to recreate oneself through the tarot. Attella, this is all in the 1700s. He wrote books on divination with tarot cards, using the Tarot of Marseille. And he actually, I think he came out with his own his own deck. But Attella came up with his books, his ideas on tarot divination would continue all the way into the 20th century. So Attella. So Court de Gebelin popularizing this idea, rather, that the tarot is from an ancient Egyptian book of wisdom. So, for example, the woman on the star card is Isis. Okay, as an example. And then you have Aliette speaking of tarot divination and trying to decrypt some of this esoteric wisdom. And then you have Eliphas Levi in the 1850s. You have Eliphas Levi in the 1800s, definitely talking about Hebrew letters and the Tree of Life, and the Kabbalah is a picture book of the Kabbalah. And then, of course, in the late 1800s, you'd have the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And then, of course, you'd have the Book of Thoth, and then you have the Builders of the Adytum, BOTA. So these would form like different tarot streams. And then, of course, you have like the French school of tarot that follows like Gerard Oncasse or Papus, the tarot of the Bohemians, and Oswald Wirth and Stanislas de Guita and Oswald Wirth. They published a tarot based around the writings of Levi. So if anyone wants to work with a little bit of a different tarot system, the French school, where the full is actually the letter Sheen, and therefore the magician is Aleph and all of this. It puts a totally different way of putting the Hebrew letters on the tree of life. But as you can see, this created all these different actually streams of occult tradition in the tarot. But originally, there's no evidence that the tarot was used for divination or as picture book of alchemy. They look like deeply esoteric cards. Like even if you go to the earliest Italian decks from the 15th century, you look at the moon card, you look at the wheel, you look at these different cards, the tower, and you see what could be deep esoteric symbolism. We just don't know. Were the designers of the decks? Most historians, if you look up most articles, I really encourage people to not just listen to these videos, but to go look these things up for themselves. Go look it up. Go read the different encyclopedia articles on tarot history, read some books on it, and because it's really important to understand especially if you're going to be a tarot reader, to understand kind of the history. Are we just going to mimic and repeat kind of the folk tales and myths that we're all told about the Book of Thoth, or talking about the tarot coming from the Knights Templars, or all kinds of stories going on out there? But most historians just totally dismiss, because there is no documented evidence of people doing divination before the 1700s with Aliette. And there is no evidence before the 1700s of this being seen as an esoteric book of ancient wisdom before Court de Gébelin and Aliette and all of this in the 1700s. However, tarot was used for gameplay for 300 years. For 3 centuries, tarot was used for gameplay. Were the designers of the decks, were the painters or the designers of the first tarot decks, did they have esoteric wisdom in mind? This is all something very interesting. My view is this. My perspective is basically this. That it doesn't matter. Whatever the history, whether tarot originated as just gameplay, even if it just started as gameplay, it evolved into a picture book of initiation. That's what it evolved into. Or what were the creators of the original decks? Did they have an occult purpose in mind? Well, we just don't know. There are different opinions. You'll have different theories thrown out there. Okay, some people would say that the founders of tarot were occultists, alchemists, in fact. Some people would say that the founders of the tarot, they just wanted gameplay. Whatever the case may be, where does this all start? Often, you'll hear it said that the tarot comes from... often you'll hear it said that playing cards come from the tarot, but that's just not true. Tarot came from playing cards. The earliest, of course, you'd have to have paper. In order to have playing cards, you need paper. The earliest decks comes with the invention of printing in China. The earliest decks seem to go back to China, to the 12th, 13th century. The earliest playing cards go back to China. I think with 4 suits, and they had, like different Taoist or Confucian virtues. They had these esoteric Chinese decks. This is not something that I've studied any depth yet. I just know of them. There were Chinese decks, and then there were Indian decks in the 13th, 14th century. And then the Mamluk decks of playing cards in Egypt. So technically, through the Mamluks, tarot did go back to ancient, to 14th century Egypt. In the 14th century, the Mamluk playing cards, which had swords, which had polo sticks, like wands, polo sticks, cups, swords, and coins. It had 4 suits. It had cards 1 through 10. And it had a knight, it had a king and 2 ministers, okay? So basically you had 52 card decks, the Mamluk cards that go back to the 13th, 14th century in Egypt. The Mamluk decks goes back to the Mamluk Empire. The Mamluk decks And there's actually, this is something you could all read about it, read about the history. I really encourage people to look this stuff up for yourself. That's actually a lot of interesting stuff, that this stuff came possibly from China, playing cards. And then you had the Indian cards coming up at the same time. And then you had the Mamluk decks in Egypt, the Mamluk Empire in Egypt. Or the Mamluks, they had their playing cards that looked like the 52 card poker pack. You had the swords, coins, cups, and polo sticks. And you had 10 numbered cards. And then you had a king and a couple of ministers. So, this in 16th century in Italy, in the 16th century, in 16th century Italy, we had trionfi. What happened was they added the full and 21 trump cards as a deck of trumps. Trumps or trionfi means the triumphs. These are cards that beat all the other cards. So basically in Italy in the 16th century, in the 15th century, you had trionfi. These are the first tarot cards. The Visconti Sforza tarot. Actually, I'm going to provide a link for some books for people that want to dive deeper into the history of tarot. I'm going to provide some books. And also, I'll provide some links to these tarot decks if anyone wants to buy some of these recreations of these ancient tarot decks. So there is the Visconti Sforza tarot is the earliest surviving tarot. The Visconti Sforza tarot is the earliest surviving tarot, and it goes back to the 15th century in Italy. This Visconti Sforza deck, and it has the full. And it has 21 trump cards, which we would all be familiar with. It has the Fool, you see the Magician, you see the Papus, which would later become the High Priestess. And Court de Gebelon actually would be like, well, that's not a female pope, that's a High Priestess. But anyways, we're going back, about 300 years before that, you had these different figures, okay? The Hanged Man and Death. And this was coming up like 100 years after the Black Plague and all of this was going on. So you had the Dance Macabre, the Dance of Death. So whatever the case may be, the lightning-struck tower, the Wheel of Fortune, the angel or the Last Judgment blowing his trumpet and people rising from their graves, the devil. These images we are familiar with, the emperor and the empress and the pope and the magician. These were added to the four suits of the playing cards, and this was used to play tarot games. For 3 centuries we have tarot games, 300 years of tarot games. Then if you jump forward to the 1700s, you have Court de Gebelon, who wrote Le Monde Primitif. Court de Gebelon. So basically all we have documented evidence for is 300 years of tarot games, tarocchi, okay, playing tarot games, okay, and we have these various strands of tarot in Italy and from Milan into the tarot of Marseille and brought into France, and then you have the French tarot and the German tarot and all these tarot games. And then suddenly in the 1700s, Court de Gebelon, but you could look at some of these cards. You could see. Honestly, I think before Court de Gebelon, I think anyone looking at these cards, now this behind my head is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck behind my head. But really, there's not a whole... Some of these are like the original in many ways. Like very deeply esoteric looking symbols, You could see anyone that's an occultist or a hermetist or an alchemist look at a tarot deck. They're going to start wondering if maybe there's something deeper behind the cards. But Court de Gebelon in the 1700s, he wrote Le Monde Primitif. And he was a high-grade Freemason. And he was somewhat of a savant in his day. and he wrote the Le Monde Primitif in the 1700s. He wrote about the tarot as being the survival of an ancient Egyptian book of Thoth, or Thoth, the ancient Egyptian god of wisdom, that the ancient Egyptian priests had hidden, concealed the ancient wisdom into the leaves of the tarot. Now, this is largely dismissed by occult scholars or academics. Nobody really believes this. You do find some people on the internet that take this literally, okay? But most academics, this is what Court de Gebelon. I am not an academic or some grand expert, okay? But my opinion, Court de Gebelon, I think he knew what he was doing. He was putting these ideas out there. He wanted them to be developed. In my opinion, he wanted these ideas developed. That this is part of some type of universal alphabet. I think he was hinting at the Hebrew letters, and that this goes back to the Kabbalah and this ancient wisdom. A picture book of initiation. So in the late 1700s, Court de Gebelon wrote this book, and he was something of a big deal in his times. So then you had these high-grade Freemasons and stuff looking at tarot, looking for occult wisdom. This was in the late 1700s. And of course, in the late 1700s, France, they were using the Tarot of Marseille. Actually, I'm going to provide a link if anyone wants to buy a copy. This is the Tarot of Marseille. This is actually a period deck like from the 1700s. Well, based upon a period deck. Check this out. This is the moon card. This is what Court de Gebelon and these French occultists would be looking at. This is the Tarot of Marseille. This is actually based on a Milanese deck that entered into France, I believe in the 1500s, and it developed into its own thing, I think in the 1600s, the Tarot of Marseille. Okay, the Tarot de Marseille. It's always been one of my favorites, but check out this moon card. Okay, that's the moon card, Tarot of Marseille. People started to think maybe there's some kind of esoteric wisdom there. Court de Gebelon, had this idea. And after Court de Gebelon, check this out. This is the tower, lightning-struck tower. Look at the feet and the hands of this lower figure. Some would say it looks like an ion. Now, my camera is backwards, but if it was flipped around, it looked more like an ion, a Hebrew letter ion. But it's interesting, okay? So this is the Tarot of Marseille. And after Court de Gebelon, you had Jean-Baptiste Alliette. Jean-Baptiste Alliette, in 1781, he wrote a book called How to Recreate Yourself with the Tarot. Yeah, how to recreate yourself. And Alliette, Jean-Baptiste Alliette, he wrote a book on how to tell fortunes with tarot. This is in the 1700s. Look at this tarot card. This is the Lovers. It really hasn't changed much in 300 years from the Lovers card and the Visconti Sforza Italian deck, okay? 300 years, not a whole lot of difference, okay? So, Court de Gebelon wrote his book, Le Monde Primitif, in the 1700s. Then you had Jean-Baptiste Alliette, who wrote about tarot divination, how to tell your fortune, how to tell your future with the cards. And he also wrote about this as a survival of ancient Egyptian wisdom teachings, or Hermetic philosophy, occult philosophy. This is the Wheel of Fortune from the Tarot of Marseille. I'm going to provide a link for anyone that's interested. But, so you had two French occultists. First there was Court de Gebelon, who wrote Le Monde Primitif, and he came up with the idea that the tarot is a survival of ancient wisdom and a universal alphabet. Then you had a second figure, Jean-Baptiste Alliette, who, or Attila. He reversed his name, and he made a living by telling fortunes with cards. He made a living. He was the first tarot reader that we have any documented evidence for. He basically is the great granddaddy of tarot reading and esoteric symbolism and tarot. Actually, we need his writings in English. I think it's all still in French. Like French people, they got it going on, you know. Them French folks, they got it going on. They got all the cool occult stuff, and a lot of it isn't translated into English. But yeah, that is a Jean-Baptiste Attila, but they were all using, check it out, this is the death card from the Tarot of Marseille. Look, it looks like the different body parts are like plants that are planted. He's got a scythe, okay? So, let's jump forward 100 years to the 1800s. So as you can see, 1700s French, you had all these high-grade Freemasons and Rosicrucians and occultists. You had Court de Gebelon, you had Aliette. I don't think Aliette was a Mason, maybe it was. But you had people, these ideas going around that this tarot is an occult wisdom teachings, okay? 100 years later comes, one, in my opinion, one of the most important occultists, definitely of the 19th century, but much more than that, Eliphas Levi. Eliphas Levi wrote Dogma and Ritual of High Magic. Arthur Edward Waite first translated him into English as Transcendental Magic. I'll provide links to that. Eliphas Levi was a French occultist in the 19th century. He gave a different Hebrew letter attribution. For him, the Hebrew letters, the letter Shin was associated with the Fool, and the magician was Aleph, the Papus or the priestess was Beit, and then, you know, the empress was Gimel, and then the emperor was Dalet, and then, you know, He would be the Pope. So anyway, it was just a different way of doing the Hebrew letters and stuff. Now, later on, Crowley and others would say that basically Levi was lying on purpose. He was trying to hide the secret teaching, whatever the case may be. There are different views on this, but Levi in his Transcendental Magic gives a different Hebrew letter attribution. After Eliphas Levi had passed on, after Eliphas Levi came along Oswald Wirth with Stanislas de Guita. I think Oswald Wirth, the Oswald Wirth tarot deck is based on Eliphas Levi. So those that want to work with the French school way of doing tarot, check out Oswald Wirth's tarot. And then also Papus, Gerard Oncost, the Tarot of the Bohemians. So, especially in the English language, you see very little information on the French school or this way of looking at the tarot. I talked about it like 10 years ago in my videos. It is a different way of doing the Hebrew letters and stuff, okay? It's like the French school. And then in the late 1800s, you get the cipher manuscripts and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and the idea that the Fool is Aleph, and the magician Beit, and the high priestess Gimel, and the empress Dalet, etc., okay? So this kind of corrects, and actually I think everything clicks in a different way, like, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn approach, and then after that, you have, so, by the way, so the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is a British secret society, esoteric occult order that taught magic and the Hermetic sciences, okay? Astrology, geomancy, astral projection, magic, alchemy. Basically, it was a big, like, university of magic, secret society in the late 1800s, right? In the practicus grade, you would learn the secret attributions of tarot. By the way, there is a paragraph supposedly in the cipher manuscripts that looks like it was a note in the handwriting of Eliphas Levi. So there are some claims that Levi had access to this and that it is an initiated tradition of knowledge that Levi had access to but then wanted to hide or didn't want to directly reveal. Now, this will get occultists fighting like cats and dogs, y'all, and we don't want that. But there are different views on this. Now, moving back to this, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. By the way, By the way, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn Tarot has been published by Robert Wang and Israel Regardi. That's another one. I'm going to leave a link. I'm not just trying to sell stuff and get commissions off Amazon, I promise. I mean, that is part, but really I want all this stuff to be available. But plus I get a little commission, If you buy from any of my links, I get a little, get a little cheese, y'all, make a little bread. But where was I going with that? So the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn Tarot has been published. You can buy it, by Israel Regardi, Robert Wang. I'm actually going to give a link to the Golden Dawn Tarot. And then, of course, you have Arthur Edward Waite's and Pamela Coleman Smith's Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. This was my first tarot. Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. Because I include Pamela Coleman Smith's name in there. She deserves it. And she was an initiate of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Pamela Coleman Smith, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, that was my first tarot deck. And then the Universal Waite, I used to always recommend is for beginners. Because it has the tarot meanings on the card. The Universal Waite deck used to be my favorite. And, of course, the Pictorial Key to the Tarot. I've read that back and forth, I've read the Pictorial Key to the Tarot over and over and over. That should go with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, Pictorial Key to the Tarot. And then, of course, you have the Book of Thoth and the Thoth deck of Crowley. And then you have Builders of the Adytum. I have to plug in Builders of the Adytum in Paul Foster Case. BOTA, Builders of the Adytum. I've worked with the builder, it's incredible. I think it's one of the most the Builders of the Adytum of Paul Foster Case. It's basically like an occult order. You can go to bota.org and it's a complete tarot course. It takes years and years and years to work all the way through their tarot course, and you're going to paint your own deck and color it in, and it's great. You learn every symbol, like what are they holding in their right hand? What are they doing with their left hand? What's behind them? What colors? You learn to analyze every card, to truly read it like a picture book, and to ascend the tree of life, to work with the imagery. You learn that in Builders of the Adytum. And I actually trained with them a little bit, and I'm still a member of Builders of the Adytum. I'm not active right now, but I worked through, I painted my own tarot deck and worked through a couple of years of their material. And really good stuff. Highly recommended. Builders of the Adytum. They are absolutely excellent. So what we have here, I would say the three main streams of modern occult tarot that follows this kind of British Illuminist type of way of doing things. I would say that the best streams would be, for people that want to just kind of get their feet wet or go really deep, actually. So the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is very popular, and the Pictorial Key to the Tarot. Are there blinds introduced? And then, there are different views on that. And then there's the Golden Dawn Tarot of Israel Regardi and Robert Wang, the Golden Dawn Tarot. That is actually available. That can, also, reading Israel Regardi's complete Golden Dawn system of magic. Okay, and then also, of course, we have the Thoth deck and the Book of Thoth, and then you have the Builders of the Adytum. And all the books by Paul Foster Case I highly recommend. So these are these different esoteric streams of tarot. And then you can go to the French tarot. You've got a totally different way of doing things, going down the rabbit holes of tarot of the Bohemians, of Papus, and everything. So, anyways, that's just a basic look, and I want to go into all these different aspects in these videos. We'll look at the Solabusca deck. We'll go into the Visconti Sforza deck. We're going to go into some of these Italian decks. We're going to deep dive and look into this stuff. So it's going to be great, and we're going to do that in these videos. So in a nutshell, there's a bunch of BS around there about the tarot. First came playing cards. In China, playing cards existed with the introduction of paper in like the 12th, 13th century in China. There were cards in India, and then the Mamluk cards in Egypt, the Mamluk cards in the 13th, 14th century, the Mamluk decks. And these playing cards that look a lot like modern poker decks in a way, like it had 52 cards, 10 pip cards, 4 suits, you had the court cards, and then you had coins, polo sticks, swords, and cups as the suits. These entered into Europe in the 1300s, and then a century later, playing cards came first. A century later, trionfi were added. The trionfi were the trump cards. So a century later, these rich Italian family, they started getting these hand-painted decks. They added the full and 21 trump cards. Modern occultists, we normally lump the full in with the other trumps and say the 22 trump cards. But originally the full was separate from this, so you have the full and 21 trump cards that were added. And these are the early Italian decks. And then these would go into Europe. Eventually you'd have the French, you'd have the, what do you call it? Tarot de Marseille or Tarot of Marseille in the 1600s. And then a century later in the 1700s, you would have two important figures. Court de Gebelin, who wrote Le Monde Primitif with this idea that the tarot is a wisdom book. Second person, you had Jean-Baptiste Alliette, or Atea, who wrote How to Recreate Yourself Through Tarot. And he wrote books on how to tell fortunes with tarot, and he actually made a living as a tarot reader. He's the great-great-great-great-granddaddy of all this, y'all. He was the world's first tarot reader that we have documented evidence for in the 1700s. 100 years later, French occultists, again, all goes back to, notice that we don't call them tarot cards. The second T is silent. Why? Because we use the French pronunciation tarot. Why is the second T silent? It's not. We don't say tarot cards, we say tarot cards. Why? Because of the French. Thank you, France. So France gave us they did give us Gerard on calls, but the French gave us Court de Gebelin and Jean-Baptiste Alliette, who kicked everything off with his writings on tarot being a wisdom book and how to tell your fortune, how to reveal the future with the cards. 100 years later, in the 1800s, you had Eliphas Levi, who wrote Dogma and Ritual of High Magic. After Eliphas Levi, you had Papus, or Gerard on Cost. You had Papus, Terror of the Bohemians, again within this French school where the full is the letter Shin. And you had Oswald Worth, who published a tarot deck based on Levi, based on the Tarot of Marseille, but adapted by Levi. And then in the late 1800s, you had the cipher manuscripts and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, where as a practicus, you learn the true tarot attributions. Two Golden Dawn initiates, Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith, would devise their own tarot deck, and Pamela Coleman Smith would use her own artistic license and also be inspired from the Solabusca deck to add pictorial images to the minor arcana. They would come up with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and he would publish the pictorial key to the tarot. And then, of course, you would have Aleister Crowley's Thoth deck. And then, of course, you would have Paul Foster Case, Builders of the Adytum. And then the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn deck was already published, and then you can consult the readings of Rigardi. So what we have here is a shit ton of stuff to go through, y'all. A lot of information. A lot of stuff. It's not something in one night or in an hour. You know, it's a lot of stuff. We're going to deep dive, y'all. So anyways, that's basically it. This is just a quick video for y'all on tarot history, and it goes with my Patreon tarot course. I really appreciate everyone on my Patreon. That $10 a month, you know, that $10 a month, it's a cup of coffee once a month, but that $10 a month makes a big difference to me, where I can put out a lot of this content for y'all. So I really appreciate y'all. This video is on our Patreon and all of that, and I'm going to keep putting out videos for the Patreon course. It's something that's being built up over time. And that is basically it. I will see y'all in the next video. I hope everyone's having a wonderful evening. See you in the next video, y'all.